Welcome back. We've been talking about how the 5 classical features of bureaucracy should work. Now we're going to talk about how often they don't work. Consider, for instance, division of labor and specialization. If it's working well, then every person is in the place that he or she belongs, and everything that he or she does is correct because he or she belongs there. Unfortunately, that doesn't always take place. And what you're going to see on the screen here is how something white turns red. I would have it bleed here, but there's no technological capability of doing that. The problems with division of labor and specialization are related to the fact that division of labor and specialization implies narrowness. If I'm working in a very narrow role, doing the same thing over and over again for years perhaps because of my career orientation, then there's going to come a time when I probably get bored. That may mean that I in turn become less efficient, less responsive, and less interested in anybody other than myself. Which means that if you as a customer or a client or a student or an inmate or a patient come to me, then you may not get very good service from me because I don't really care about you anymore. That's really a danger in large organizations because the larger they become, the more specialized and the narrower each person's responsibilities become. So we've got to watch out for that in large organizations. Now, what about impersonal orientation? You can assume that impersonality in our society is taken to be a negative thing. Impersonality means not caring about other persons, and indeed that's what can happen. Even though the theory is we're just going to be fair, not be too nice, not be too mean, in reality what impersonality can mean is that we start treating people like furniture. So if you come to a large organization, again, a hospital, a school system, the military even, you come there and you are one among many thousands of other people who've been in the same situation, then if the people who are in the bureaucracy treat you impersonally, you begin to feel that you're not important and that you can't get the kind of service that you deserve. Ralph Hummel put it this way. He said, "The bureaucrat has to be a truncated remnant of a human being, allowed to feel only those emotions specified in the work orders." In other words, you do what you're told, nothing more, with no particular compassion or feeling whatsoever for other people. Obviously, that's bad, so this one's going to turn red also. The third classical feature of bureaucracy, again, is hierarchy of authority. Well, this can go wrong too. Every level in a large organization is a place where messages can be blocked or distorted. So you know the telephone game you play in kindergarten where one person whispers in one person's ear and that person whispers to the next person and the next person and the next person. That's precisely the same kind of thing that can happen when you have an extended hierarchy in an organization. So especially when it's a busy organization and messages are flying in all different directions, both orally and in writing and electronically, in that kind of environment, every level is a place where people can misunderstand each other. Now, in addition to that, one of the other perversions or failures of hierarchy of authority is that people below a person in the hierarchy tend to want to please the person above them. So they will filter out some of the bad news and give only the good news. So if you take that logically to its conclusion, the person at the top is always going to feel that everything is great. Well, we know that everything is not always great. As customers, as clients of large bureaucracies, we know that things aren't always great. And yet, because of hierarchy of authority, the person at the top, again, is going to probably have a much rosier view than the people at the bottom. Another problem with hierarchy of authority is something called bureaucratic orbiting. We're all familiar with what that means. You can also call it the runaround. If you are orbited bureaucratically, that means you go to a person at this level in the hierarchy, and that person says, "Well, I'm sorry, I can't really deal with that. I will have to refer that to my supervisor." Well, they go to the supervisor, perhaps they never get to the supervisor. So you come back again and say, "I thought I asked you about something." "Well, my supervisor was busy. I'll put you in touch with the assistant associate under deputy vice supervisor." And so the danger of hierarchy of authority is that you can get referred and counter-referred and re-referred back and around throughout the hierarchy itself. You can also have a situation that James Boren referred to as a sycophantocracy, which means a large organization run by sycophants. A sycophant meaning somebody who always flatters those around him or her or above him or her. All right, what's the way in which rules and regulations can go awry? I think we're all aware of situations in which rules and regulations have been applied strictly and correctly, but in ways that hurt people, that overlooked, again, as impersonal orientation does, the fact that we're all human beings with needs and desires and special circumstances that can change. So C.P. Snow had this to say about obeying rules and regulations. He said, "When you think of the long and gloomy history of man, you will find more hideous crimes committed in the name of obedience than have ever been committed in the name of rebellion." Think about the fact that in Florida several years ago, a lemonade stand run by an 11-year-old boy was shut down because, according to the regulations, it should have had restroom facilities. Think about the IRS agent who was kidnapped and taken in his own car from Atlanta to New Orleans. What a terrible experience. He got back to Atlanta, he put in a request for mileage reimbursement on his car, and it was denied because the people who supervised him said, you only get money for mileage if you're involved in official business. Now, isn't that just crazy? You could probably have many suggestions for other examples in whereby rules and regulations go amiss. I guess perhaps the best example of rules and regulations, or the kind of motto you might consider when you wonder what goes wrong with them, is IIDIFY IGDIFE. You'll recognize this immediately when I tell you what it stands for. It stands for, if I do it for you, I gotta do it for everyone. How many times have you run into that? How many times have you found rules and regulations that were enforced without any regard to the human being involved? We don't all have the same needs. It's not a good response to a situation to say, if I do it for you, I gotta do it for everybody. And yet that happens, doesn't it? All right, and then the last feature of classical bureaucracy, again, career orientation, can go wrong too. The way in which it can go wrong is typified by what was originally called the Peter principle. Lawrence Peter, who used to teach at Washington State University, pointed out that many times people move up in an organization until they get to the place where they don't belong. Unfortunately, they don't go back down again, and they don't leave. They may just get ossified and cemented into that level. Now, if this happens at every level, pretty soon every level is occupied by somebody who can't do the job. Isn't that horrible? Haven't we seen examples of that in our own lives? I guess I heard a definition one time of an expert. The definition was, an X has two parts. An X is a has-been, and a spurt is a drip under pressure. When the bureaucracy goes wrong with career orientation, that's what kind of expertise and what kind of experts we end up with. Isn't that sad? Time for another quick break. When we come back, we'll be dealing with ways to combat and overcome the challenges of bureaucracy. Stay with us.